Oh, the SQLite command. Did you, what operating system, Mac?
Yeah.
Did you use the SQLite 3 command, or did you figure it out?
I tried doing that, but I just couldn't without access like a database file.
Oh, you might have to show me after, see what's going on. Did you put in the name of the database file after SQLite 3?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, show me what's happening there. Anybody else have a problem? Okay, if you didn't try, again, just kind of shrugging my shoulders at you. But to everyone else, I appreciate your efforts. We need to get going. Let's review what we had. Remember, we had all this code and then we moved it into this class right here just now. And so with that in mind, let's see what we've got. We've got an initializer and then two methods. The initializer just connects to the database. That's equivalent to what you did in terminal, right? And what you can still do, by the way. You're not forbidden from using the terminal now that you've done this. You can use both interchangeably. So you can test in one and experiment with the other. And then remember the cursor. What's that for? What's the cursor? What's the job of the cursor? Anybody? Okay, it's kind of your, yeah, that's a great way to say it. It's your input and output. It's kind of like a pointer. It says, not a memory pointer, but like a conceptual pointer saying, I want to query something. I have an input or a question or a query. And then how do you get your data back? That's also, this is a great example. You send a query and you get data back, both using the cursor. The connection is mostly just used initially, and when you need to persist your changes, like I've got something to save, like an insert, you commit. Okay, so that's just not too bad. Some of you are learning the SQL and the Python. Some of you kind of know the SQL, you're just learning the Python. But it's not going to get much more complicated than this. We have a few things that we need to take care of as sort of one-off fixes, like we need to try to avoid those tuples because they aren't very descriptive. We need to talk about SQL injection, and then we need to connect this, once we get this done, we need to connect it back to our server, which means we should probably rename it because I've got it as a temporary name, and then import it and use it in our server. So we've tested this code previously, but not since we've moved it into the class, which is fine. We'll test it in a minute. So let's talk about the tuples. Do you remember those tuples? You were getting something like this. Can't see it anymore, but you were getting like this kind of thing, and then another one with your data inside of them. And so that list of tuples, we talked about how that's great and all your data's there, but there aren't any descriptions, right? We don't know that if this is like 7, Bob, and then 12, like Bob, maybe, we know what that is, but what are these? So if we had descriptions, that would be better. Okay, so if you do this, we'll just do this together, but if you open up Chrome and you search for Python 3, SQLite 3, that's probably good enough, you will get the documentation for SQLite 3 and Python 3. So this first link should do the trick. Okay. And then pick your version of Python, mostly just make sure it's a recent version of 3. That's probably going to be about the same as everything else in 3. And then I want you to search for row factory, row_factory. Row factory, the name row factory means that it's a factory that creates the outputs for each row. So there's a row factory that creates these tuples. Think of it that way. Well, we can change the row factory to produce dictionaries, and they give it to you right here. The code's right here to do it. And I just want to show you how to plug this code into your class. It turns out the factory itself is just a function. And it's a little complicated. Well, it's not complicated, it's just obscure. The cursor is given and the row is given, which is a record. And then it uses the cursor to pull out the labels, and then it creates a little dictionary. You can see how that's working right here. And so it turns out you don't need to understand this perfectly. You mostly need to know what it's doing, and you can look at it if you want to. We're going to copy and paste this function verbatim, and then we're going to plug it in to our connection. And so to do that, I'll just show you how that would look. You're going to copy and paste that little guy, throw it at the tippy top of this class. It's not a method, it's just a function, so throw it at the top, outside of your class. Okay, it's just its own independent thing. It's just a utility function. And then it's pretty easy to use. You're just gonna say self.connection, after you establish the connection, .row factory equals the name of the function. Notice that you're not actually calling the function like this. Don't call the function. You're just passing the function as a value. The reason why, can anyone tell me why you would not call the function?
Because it, the thing that you're getting it to, you call it.
Yeah, the connection, or really the library, is going to call it for us. And that's important because it's going to have to repeat that function many times over the life of the database. So it's going to just use it. We're kind of handing it over on a plate. Okay? So that's all that's happening. It's very important that this line comes before your cursor. If you establish the cursor before this, it won't work. It won't have that effect. So make sure it's kind of in that order. Okay, and that's fun. We'll see that working in a minute. I'm not calling my class at the moment, but we will, and we'll see what that kind of looks like. Just wanted to get the code in there. It was kind of easy. Just had to do it. Alrighty, so let's do a quick kind of aside and talk about this thing called injection. Any questions with what we've got on the screen right now, though? You good there? Okay. So just think of that factory as a mapper that takes those tuples and makes them dictionaries. It'll be way better. Okay. Let's talk about SQL injection, and then we'll fix that problem, and then we'll move this and plug it into, or not move it, but plug it into our database, or to our server. Okay, so tuples, that's done. Got rid of the tuples, we hope. Okay, now SQL injection. What is SQL injection? Or injection? Any ideas? Some of you maybe? Yeah.
Is it like when you do the %s in the string and then?
Yeah, it is. It has to do with these values here. That's where SQL injection is related. And it does have to do with the %s. But what is SQL injection?
When you put SQL code or like a query into a form, kind of.
Yeah, like if SQL makes it in through the data. So let me show you an example. Let's say we've got name, rating, hours. Notice these are variables or parameters we'd established, but we hadn't used them yet. Let's try something like this. Instead of red robin, that's fine and dandy, right? But that's hard-coded red robin. So if you were to use some pretty ugly string concatenation here and replace red robin with name, like so. Notice the single quotes are still there. It's just whatever is in the variable name gets kind of inserted. That would work. You would have a dynamic query now. and it wouldn't break, it would work. But SQL injection is this. What if this variable name, we don't know where it comes from, somewhere else. And it turns out that's actually going to come from the server, and the server is going to get it from where? The client, and the client's going to get it from a little input box. Okay. So in a very indirect way, whatever the user types makes its way here. Right? It goes from input to variable to fetch Ajax, HTTP, through the wormhole, back to the server, into a variable, into the database class, into this function in here. Probably the others too. And maybe not all of them, but probably. So if you do that, right, if you start going down this road, we introduce this SQL injection problem, which, like you said, when SQL makes it from a foreign place in here. So if the user were to type Fred here, that's fine, but if they were to type other nonsense, it could go anywhere from an error to really, really bad if they are intentionally trying to inject SQL into the data to try to manipulate your query. That's really bad. So there's actually, I always show this comic. Some of you may have seen it, maybe most of you haven't, I don't know. Some of you. XKCD. Bobby Tables. Have you guys seen this? It's kind of a classic comic. But it's what we're talking about. And it's a great example of what we're trying to prevent. I'll let you read it. See if you can figure out what's happening here. Yeah, so the mom in this is inserted Robert, quote, see semicolon, drop table, students, okay? So filling out a form, if a user were to do something like this in Spirit, then your database is going to be like, oh yeah, sure, let me by all students gone, right? And so we are going to do this. We're going to sanitize our database inputs. That means if the user is typing junk, or worse yet, actual SQL, into a form or somewhere like that, we need to sanitize it, meaning get rid of that, or prevent it in the first place, okay? Now, couple things. Number one, any good database library is going to have a way to do this easily, quickly, and effectively. And that said, you'd be surprised how many of those headlines you find out about, or leaking data, or just frankly just bad business that you hear with all this malicious activity is caused by a senior developer totally screwing this up in a big high-profile app. It happens all the time. Like, this happens all the time. It's not one of those things that we've apparently moved past. No, it still happens every day, unfortunately. And so so maybe it's an intern, or maybe, like I said, sometimes maybe it's like a senior developer making dumb mistakes. So don't be that intern, don't be that developer. You want to make sure you're understanding the problem and making sure that every time you're writing an SQL query with data, and that data comes from the user, you're making very sure that you're not letting in exploits like this. So anyway, that's fun. Bobby Tables. So let's hide this. How do we fix it? Well, the first rule of thumb is never ever concatenate into a query. Never. It doesn't matter where it is or where it comes from. That rule's pretty safe, right? Never concatenate a query. Write the query, and if you don't want the data to be hard-coded, then there's a better way. Okay, so what we're going to do in SQLite 3, this is how this works. Replace everything in these parentheses, okay, with something that looks just like this. Question mark, comma, question mark, comma, question mark. So you used a %s, but in SQLite it's a question mark. So name, rating, and hours, those are the three data pieces. So we're going to replace those with question marks, which are just placeholders. You're just kind of identifying, I've got three things I'm going to need. No quotes go in here, strings or otherwise, doesn't matter, just put question marks, nothing fancy. That's nice, it's very clean. And then you're going to give those data pieces independently. You're not going to concatenate them, you're going to provide essentially a data structure for those pieces. And it's just an array, it's a list. So you could have a list like this, data, name, comma, rating, comma, hours. In the right order, make sure that the order of your data in this array matches the order you're telling the database, right? So that it doesn't swap two of them. So name, rating, and hours, name, rating, and hours. And then these three question marks will get substituted with the actual data in a very sanitized way. We call this data binding, right? You're binding a variable to the query rather than trying to actually edit the query directly. That's going to give you problems. And then as far as that variable goes, it's just the second parameter after the string. You just specify data here, and it does it. And not only does it do it, and it's dynamic, and oh, it's way cleaner, right? Those quotes were killing me a minute ago. Not only all of that cleanliness, but it's safe. Okay, you're not actually experiencing any SQL injection risk at this point. I suppose there could be a bug in the library, but I don't think that's likely, right? You're going to have pretty good luck here. And any good database library, any real database library, should have something similar to this. Okay, so fix number one, fix number two. Fix number one is the tuples. I made them dictionaries. Fix number 2 is dynamic data without risking SQL injection. And now all we have to do is package this, save it to a file by our server, import it, and actually call the methods. So we're pretty close to actually getting this to work and actually persisting data, kind of like we were in the first assignment, but with a real database this time, at least, and being able to save individual records and getting it back. Okay, questions right now? Good? I'm just going to keep going unless you have questions. Okay, rename this file and move it to our server. So I can do that. I'm just going to clean this up. This is pretty well good to go now. I'm going to close it and I'm going to rename it. So right now it's called DB demo. I'm just going to call it kind of like my restaurants DB, but PY. Okay, so you should have a few things. You can get rid of your dummy DB. You don't need that. You've got your actual database, and then you've got your PY file, which is the code we wrote. Now, let's go back to the server, import the PY file, call the constructor, figure out where we should do that, and then use the thing. Okay. So, this is my server. I've got my dummy DB. I'm going to import my restaurant DB the same way. What did I call it? Oh, wrong one. I'm going to call it Restaurants DB because that's what I've been naming everything. I just want to be consistent. Restaurants DB. Okay. Sorry, that's really loud. Restaurants DB. I don't even know how to change the volume on this piece of junk anymore. What did you, someone have a question?
No.
Okay, so from Restaurants DB, import Restaurants DB, or whatever you called it, right? Remember, when you're importing a module in Python, the from is the file without the extension, and then import is the actual object or class or function or whatever it is you're importing. Okay, so dummy DB, I'm gonna get rid of this because I don't really want it here anymore. You don't need both, right? So get rid of that one. I'm gonna get rid of this one too because I don't want my array anymore, and I don't need this anymore. All right. So put that back for a minute. Previously, we instantiated the dummy DB as a global variable. That's fine if you did it there or here, doesn't really matter. I'm not going to recommend instantiating the database as a global variable. You'd probably be fine. I don't think there would be any serious issues. The reason why it could be a problem is if there's ever a hiccup in connecting or disconnecting from your database, you don't want to have to restart your server to remedy that problem. If you instantiate it down here, right as you need it, for example, then you're always ensuring a very fresh connection to your database every time. And if one request had a problem, the next one would likely succeed, if that makes sense. So I'm going to move that to kind of down below. And so I've got lots of versions of this, right? JSON.dumps restaurants, JSON.dumps db read all records. Well, my restaurant database has a get all restaurants method that kind of does the same thing. It returns an array, right? So instead of the array I deleted and instead of the dummy database, I'm going to call get all restaurants. But that does require a database, so go ahead and construct the database. I'm going to get rid of that, kind of clean things up a little bit here. See how that works? It turns out it's not that hard, right? You just instantiate the thing. It has a constructor that knows what to do and just call the function. Remember, the function itself, this method, returns a list. That list gets passed to JSON, which encodes the Python array or list as a JSON list. And then the JSON list gets converted to UTF-8 bytes, and those bytes get sent to the client via the W file. Okay, so it's kind of a multi-step one-liner. It's okay if you've got that in a few lines, as long as it's all in the right order. Okay, let's see if it works. I'm gonna, let's see, I'm gonna start my server. Hopefully it doesn't crash. I'm gonna open Postman. And I'm gonna see if I can pull out those restaurants I had created the other day. So I'm gonna do a GET request on restaurants, hit the button, and yeah, they're there. Remember I had 2 Red Robins because I run it a few times. I'm actually saying my database data, and of note, these aren't tuples, they are actual dictionaries, right? They're actual lists. This is because of the row factory we introduced. If you want to see what it would look like without that row factory, that's easy enough. Go over to your database, whoops, maybe. Go over to your database and comment out this row factory line and restart your server and see what it looks like. That's what you're going to get without that row factory. It's going to look like a big mess. Good luck interpreting this with your JavaScript. You'd have to use array indexes. It would be terrible. You'd be like, you know, restaurant sub 0, restaurant sub 1. It would be the worst. So appreciate that row factory and make sure that's a part of your code. You're going to be in a bad place if you don't do that. Especially if you propagate that forward in the semester, then you're really going to hate your life. So make sure you don't miss that little detail.
Back to your server real quick.
Yep. Just these 2 lines, that's all I really changed. Oh, and I changed the import. Okay, you good? That's getting data. How would we amend or change this code? Notice I was appending to an array at one point, and then I started using my fake database. Which was appending it. How do I do this now? What do I do? Insert restaurant. Whatever my insert restaurant method was. Had a few parameters specifically. It took name and other things. Okay. I actually had hours in there too, so I probably should pull hours in because I never did that before. Remember, what is this that I'm writing? What is this doing? This line of code right here. This one. What is it doing? These 3, really.
Creating keys for the database?
It's creating variables, not
Variables.
keys.
Yeah, sorry.
To that key. It's getting the value of the key. Where is the key coming from? This is a dictionary from up here, from here, from here, from here, from here. So where is this data coming from? The client. And these keys come, they're inside parsed body, right? The keys are being plugged into parsed body. It's a dictionary. Where does the body come from? The client. So the body is being parsed. These keys are the name equals Red Robin, ampersand, rating equals. Some of you guys forget that, so don't. These keys come deliberately, specifically, not arbitrarily, from your JavaScript code. Okay, so once you've got those, there's a comment here that says save into our array. Save into the database. We'll fix that. Okay, and so instead of doing this jump, we're going to do something like this. db equals restaurant db again, and db.insert restaurant, and I believe the parameters were name and rating and hours. So I can just take all my data pieces and plug them right in.
Did you get rid of the save record?
Yep, because that was from the fake database. I don't need that anymore. Right? The dummy DB, that was dummy DB stuff. Don't need dummy DB. Right, so don't leave remnants of whatever you were previously doing. If it was a text file, if you were using my data, I think most of you are using my dummy DB class. That was just like a 5-minute workaround just to get something. We don't need that with this. So clean up all the old junk. Now you just got this. So we get the content length, which is the number of bytes. Good review here. content length, which is the number of bytes of the body from the client. We use that value to read the body, but that's just raw text, right? Name equals, etc. We parse that using our helper function that we imported. Notice we're printing these out. A lot of you guys don't actually look at this after you print it, or maybe you're not even printing it. Keep printing those out and look at them, stare at them every day. Remind yourself, what is the data that you're getting, which will make this make way more sense. And then we're just saving and responding. Okay, that's that. That's basically upgrading your last assignment to implement a database. Okay, so with this, you should be able to, without changing your JavaScript at all, you don't have to change it one bit, you should be able to start using your database now. Let's see if it all works here. So if I try to post a new restaurant, name, that's great, perfect. Send that over. I got a 201 that time. Double check your console. There again, no errors, but pay attention to the body, right? Rib, chop, house, all encoded, and rib and chop house all not encoded in the dictionary. So there's the name, hours, rating keys that we were looking at before. So there's Y. Now if we keep going, we should be able to run that get again. And I've restarted my server a bunch, yet here's still red fort, red iguana, red robin again, and rib and chop house. And not only that, but don't forget, if you go back to SQLite on the terminal, and you go to your DB file, select star from restaurants, it's all there, right? Your database is hopping along with your server now, okay? It's about as simple as database gets, if it's a SQLite database, but that's not hard, for sure. I don't think that's hard, okay? All right, that's all good. Do you guys have any questions?
I do.
Yes?
Will you just remind me where in the JavaScript we can find those?
Those keys?
Yeah,
Yeah, hold on.
I'm trying to make sure I'm not looking at something.
Wrong folder. Oh, sorry. I don't think it'll let me change the volume. Yeah, I can't.
The encode data?
Right here, where you see the encode URI component, you should see encode URI component. These are the keys.
Okay.
Remember, data becomes this really long, ugly string. So data, this data string, should exactly match, if you go back to your server, it'll match this. This is the data string at the top. So that's literally you manufacturing that, which is why it becomes a dictionary, and that's why the keys matter. Good.
Can I see it one more time?
Which one?
The
code?
Yeah.
Yep, it's right there.
Yeah.
Yep, so that's that. And every time you add an ampersand, you can add another field. So my app right now is not sending hours. That's problematic. So hours equals encode URI component restaurant hours. Of course, that means I probably need another field, which I haven't added yet. Hours. And hours. So, yeah. As long as you got the data, you can send as much data as you want to send.
Are you gonna upload this somewhere?
What part?
The every part.
No. I will upload, not everything. I can't find my code. I will upload my database class so that you got a good, awesome example of that. And then I'll let you figure out the rest. How about that? Does that work? Sorry, I just have something on my mind. I want to change my HTML so I don't later wonder why my code is broken. Cool. Yeah, I'm happy to upload this. I didn't really change much else, and I think it's worth your while to puzzle through the 2 lines of code I actually changed on the server. to make sure you know how it fits together. Yeah, that's good. That basically buttons this up. Now we'll talk about this a little bit more when we start thinking about deleting records and updating records. I'll probably show you delete one day, so I can show you an example query, and we'll talk about retrieve as well. Maybe we'll have time to do that one today, actually. But eventually, like update's the tricky one on this assignment, by the way. Both with the database and the server and the client. Update's the most sophisticated one, because it's kind of like putting all the other ones together to create something to update it, because you have to find an existing record and you have to be able to make a change to it, data. So it's the more tricky one, and so I'll let you do that one. But all the other ones, or most of the other ones, we'll at least look at briefly. Okay. So a couple things on my list. Going back to the assignment at some point would be good, so we can review what we've got to do, because I don't want you to lose sight of what's next. And then maybe a little bit more database code. And one other thing, I'd really like to clean up this, because it's already getting out of hand. It has been for some time, and we haven't done much about it. If you look at do get, you've got if path is restaurants, and this is really ugly and nasty, and this is kind of ugly and nasty. And here's the thing, as we look at the assignment, you're going to be adding even more code to this server. And you can't delete the code, but you can at least move it around a little bit so that it makes a little bit more sense as isolated components. We could add methods, for example, rather than having all of our code in an if statement. Not ideal, especially as we add more stuff. Okay. So we'll do that, and then maybe we'll do retrieve and talk about that. Let's go look at the assignment really fast. So kind of refresh your memory on what we're doing here. You need a resource with at least 5 attributes. So my restaurant resource has 3, the hours, the rating, the name. And then looking at the server, we've got 5 RESTful routes. Kind of talked about these, but we need to talk about them more. We've got list, which is retrieving retrieving a collection, and then retrieve, which retrieves an individual element, like a single restaurant. That's a nice, easy one we can maybe do today. Create, we've done that. Replace and delete, we talked about that a little bit. Okay. Soon, not yet, but soon, we're going to need to worry a little bit more about cores. Cores is going to have to change a little bit for these two. We'll talk about why. In fact, I might assign some reading on that today, so we can talk about it next time. And then 404 responses, there are just more of them now. We'll talk about that. Okay, and then don't forget what your client's supposed to do, right? We mentioned this a little bit, but really read through this. You're still going to have a list of records somewhere, whatever your records are, you're going to have them listed out. You're still going to be able to create a new one, but notice it says the form, whether it's the same form or a similar form, maybe, it's going to have to allow an update of a record, like edit this record, pre-fill the form, make a change, click save now to update it. And you're going to have some buttons, like a delete button to be able to delete a record, and like an edit button to be able to specify which record you want to edit or delete. Okay, things like that. And not everything's going to fit on the page all at the same time. So remember, we're making single page app, just one document, so you might have to hide and show some different things to get everything to fit. Probably, otherwise it's going to be a lot of mess on the page all at the same time. So having divs, some being hidden or shown, that's what it means by UI transitions, like hiding one thing to make room for another, that kind of stuff. And then everything else is pretty straightforward. We'll talk about, we'll probably go through this at least one more time before we're done. Read through the 404 section and see if you can interpret what I mean here by 404 or not found responses. It's going to be a little bit more than what you had done in the last assignment. Similar and then more. Okay, so let's keep going. Let's talk about a few things. Number 1, code organization, and number 2, I want to look at these 5 and see where they fit and what they look like different than what we've done before. And then we're going to do one of them. Or at least we'll start. Okay, so go back to the REST page on Wikipedia. Remember I told you to have this in your notes? REST? Okay. Anyway, I don't know why that's on this page. This one right here. Okay. remember I've shown you this before and I've told you to put it in your notes and put your own descriptions in, maybe. And so, where are we going? Well, where we've been are these two. This is what we've done. This is what's working as of what we just barely finished. Okay, and then the last assignment, those two. What are we going to do on this assignment? 3 more boxes. Which ones are they? Which of these 3? You got 10. We've done 2. You've got 7, 8 to pick from. Delete? Which one? Which delete?
Delete
Two.
was both.
Oh.
Delete was both.
Nope. I mean, you can do both if you want, but I require one. Which one? Let's figure it out then. Delete. Removes an existing member from the collection as specified by the unique identifier given as a path parameter. We need to talk about what that part means. But from that, which one?
First one?
The memorable. Yeah.
This one. It is this one. Delete a member. We don't want to delete the collection. That'd be like delete the whole table kind of thing. So you could, you're welcome to. I have a few students who want to do this. That's obviously not as common as just deleting an individual member. So the keyword here is member instead of all members. Okay. So that's the one we're going to do. How about update? I will give you this. Replace versus update, what's the difference? It's very confusing. We're gonna pretend like this row doesn't exist and we're gonna call this replace, or you can call it update, I'm okay with that. Which one though? Are you gonna update or replace the collection, or are you gonna update or replace a member? A member, yeah. And then last but not least, I'm going to make you implement both versions of Git, the one you've already done, and I want this one too. The main reason for that, even though it's not super useful, maybe, could be, the reason I want you to do that is because it's a nice one to start with to get your feet wet with this column. You'll notice we haven't actually been in this column, we've only been in this column, right? And it's easy to change a member, or a method, right? Get, post, put, delete, patch, delete, like those are easy to change. The difference in the URL is a little trickier. So you've got /collection, for example, /restaurants, and then this would be /restaurants/ an identifier. So you need to really puzzle through and understand the difference there. So the difference between this and something like this. So this is a unique identifier. It turns out this is probably the primary key in the database. Okay. This is the member or the collection? Collection. This is the member or the collection? The member. Notice that under all circumstances, the member URL is always prefixed with the collection URL. Don't singularize this. True, we are talking about one restaurant, but that isn't what REST says. REST has us specify the collection and then an identifier. It's the identifier that makes it singular, not the word, so just keep it consistent. I'm surprised how many of you won't listen to what I just said. Okay, so just keep these two in your notes because you're going to basically just have these two varieties. There isn't a third variety. It's just like this or this.
So I was wondering, when we do for both of those, when we make the method get and post, you just make one method and then you specify the URL like that. You don't make two methods, one for the collection and one for
Yes, and let's do that. I was going to clean up my code a little bit, but I think let's make some progress on this, and then it'll be an even better reason to clean up our code because you'll see how messy it's going to get.
Okay.
But yeah, let me show you how that's going to work. The answer is just a single get,
Okay.
like do get. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so everybody clear? We're going to do this one. We already did, technically. But we're going to do this one. We'll do this one right now, the easy one. Of course, I'll do the easy one and let you do the hard ones. Post, that one we already did. And then these three. Oh boy, I keep doing that. Replace, or I meant two, I'm sorry. Replace and delete are the two that we're going to do and get on the member. So we'll save the others for another day. Let's look from the server's perspective at how we could retrieve, not the collection, we are doing that already, the member, an individual member. How do you do it? Okay? And then on Monday we'll clean up my code because, like I said, it's turning into a rat's nest. And what I'm about to do is just gonna prove my point. Okay, so where are we gonna put that? Someone was already saying something along the lines of do get. How do we know do get? Well, because we're talking about the HTTP get method. And remember, do get, that's just Python's implementation of it. That's just the name of a method. It's really get that we're worried about. It's a get request. And that makes sense because what's the rule between get and post? What's the rule? Get is read only. No side effects, no changes. Yep, that's the answer. Midterm's coming up, guys. So, what was I going with this? Delete, that's a definite side effect. So that can't be a get request. Update, that can't be a get request because it's making a change. Create is obviously making a change. So the read-only methods are going to be your get request methods. They have no side effects. They ask and they use their eyes only. Okay, so the path here, conclusion, we're inside this method. We don't make another one. But we do have to worry about this. This is saying if path is restaurants. And then there's an else that just says, 404, right? It's this or nothing, basically. What could we do then to do something like this? Yeah, we could do an elif. The tricky part is, how do you write your elif? So let's get past all this. This is where things get even more messy than they already are. Elif self.path is restaurants 5. Elif 6. How do you do this? You can't just do string equality anymore. It doesn't quite work. I mean, it's the right idea, but this isn't. Do you see why this isn't going to work? Right? I mean, 5 is great, but we need more than 5.
Could you like wildcard the last part?
You got to somehow.
Okay.
How? That becomes variable, inherently variable, right? Like that part of the path is going to change. And yet you need to differentiate it because you're going to do something different here. Here you're like, here's all the restaurants. Here it's like, well, actually, not only does this become a wild card, but you need to know what this is. You need that 5Y. Yeah, you've got to like take that off to the database and pull out a 5, a restaurant with 5. So you got to have that, and you don't know what it is. So it's a little trickier. Anybody have a plan, a design, a thinking, an idea?
The easiest way, you could split the string at the slash and just pull the last element.
Yeah, okay. So some of you straight out of 1410 might not have as many tools in your tool belt, but that's fine. We've got the slashes. They seem to separate things pretty well for us. See that? So, we'll probably have to finish this Monday, but that's fine. We can at least get the idea rolling here. If you look at Python really quick, and let's say I've got some path as restaurants 5, okay? Print some path, right? Okay, it's just a string. But what happens if you did some path dot split on slash? You know the split function?
It'll be a list with restaurants and 5 in it.
Yeah. See, it pulls out everything nicely. What's the deal with the first element there?
Well, before the first slash, there was nothing.
Yeah, it's just telling you there wasn't anything before the first slash, which is always going to be the case. So you can expect that to always be. But then this is nicely separated out, right? So one or both of these you could test against and have them separated. How would you know if the path is restaurants or restaurants 5?
After you split it, you can check the first index on the 0 and the first index if it equals restaurants.
Okay, or index 1 you mean?
Yeah, index 1.
Yeah. How do I know if it's a collection or a member though?
Check if there's a third index.
Check the length.
Yeah, like
Likely that. Yeah, so this trick can take you far in life. You can do it right up here at the tippy top of your do get if you need to. Like for example up here. You could say parts, or maybe path parts is self.path.split. I can't type today. Okay. And then you just have to design your if statements accordingly, right? You can use path parts using all the tips and tricks we just discussed to rewrite at least this if statement, if not that one. That one is fine the way it is, but you could make them similar, okay? Yeah, we're out of time. How about this? How about you figure that out and somebody bring a solution, it's already Friday, that's a good thing, Monday, and we will go from there. Also, think about this. If something, big old blob of code, elif something, big old blob, well there will be, else another blob. It's going to be hard to split out your if, elif, else. Like that's got to be somewhere, and I think that's nice. But these big old chunks of similar but differentiated code could go somewhere else. Like we could improve the readability of this code. I'm thinking this right here could be its own method, and this that we're about to write also, and this also. You probably have this repeated in your code a whole bunch, so it'd be nice if that was a method. So also think about that. On Monday, I want to figure out how to make the path work and figure out how to clean this up, and then test it, see if we get it to work.
Out of curiosity, what's the advantage of doing split string versus saying if path dot starts with /restaurant/?
The starts with is good. If you said path starts with restaurants, then you know that, you at least know that you're close. The difference with split is then you can pull the 5 out individually. That's the benefit. Yeah, and you can do it either way, but at some point you're going to have to still get the 5, so split is still your friend, I think. Or you might have another trick. You could just implement split by yourself, right? You can loop over and find the slash and create a little for loop. Great code grinder exercise, but if you've got a built-in function, might as well use it. Anything else, question-wise? Okay. I graded your assignments. There are like 2 of you that I missed code for, but for the most part I got everything I needed.